So in today's sessions, what I wanted to cover is uh, on Azure fundamentals, how should be our learning path will look like, right? So when I browsed our Azure portal, I felt it's a very clumsy and very difficult to make out how your learning path should look like, right? So I will take you on to the Azure portal. So I will show you. It's a little very confusing, right? So you can see when I go to Azure portal, I go to the Azure portal. I click on the documentation part. So as I can see, I see here a lot of services are available, right? So when I click on the compute service, you can see there is a list of services which are mentioned in the compute, and the same service, AKS service, is even also mentioned under the containers, right? So yeah, you can see ACI, apps, Azure functions, they are repeating. So you can see same in compute, you can see the Azure functions here, right? You can see here also. So to simplify our learning process, so what I have done is I prepared a small presentation to walk you through that how our learning path should look like and what is the path we take in coming videos. So entire Azure, I split up into the two major services. One is Azure IaaS services and another one is Azure PaaS services. So in the Azure IaaS services, I have listed some of the services over here, such as Azure VM, Application Gateway, Bastion service, Firewall service, DDoS, Traffic Manager, Load Balancer, storage, such as the disk storage or the file storage. So how I categorized between IaaS and PaaS, the services where you no need to write a code to manipulate the services, right? So when I use some of the services, I had to write a code to use those services. So, but these are the services where you no need to write a single piece of code. It should be configured along with your application. Example, Azure VM, you have to just go ahead and provision the Azure VM. There is no code you have to write it in a C sharp to consume or to decommission or to manipulate any of the resources on the Azure VM. Application gateway, basically we use it for the security aspect. Again, it has to be configured along with your application. Bastion service is a service which will help you to connect to any of the Azure VM through the browser. So that is a basic use of a Bastion service. Firewall, I think pretty much everybody knows why the firewall is being used. So firewall help you to against the any attacks. So DDoS is again going to help you against any attacks such as cyber attacks. So it's a distributed denial of service. So if you're getting a lot of requests from a single IP address, then DDoS is going to protect your environment. So there is another service I have mentioned here as a traffic manager, where you are going to route the traffic globally based upon the various requirements. So my requirement can be, if the traffic coming from India, it has to be sent to the India data center. If the traffic is from US, then it has to be sent to the US. Or my another rule can be 30% of the traffic should be routed to one region, and the remaining 70% of the traffic can be routed down to the another region. So we can have various combinations on the traffic manager. So when we get down to the that particular service, I will explain you more on the traffic manager. A load balancer is again, it's going to help you to balance the load between the two services. If one of the server or one of the region goes down, it will divert or it will move your services to the another region. That's the use of the load balancer. Storage, again, it will help you for the different aspects of the storage. So whenever you have a VM and we want to connect some of the disk to the VM, then we are going to use a disk storage or the file storage. These are basically hardware components where the disk storage will be available in various capacities. VMs are available in various combination. We have a D series, E series, DS series, A series, B series. So they got a very different use. So example, in VM, we can have high performing VM, CPU intense VM, general VM, development related VM. So there are a lot of categories are there in IaaS services. So we'll see next on the PaaS. So here comes the most of the services which we see in the Azure. Though here I listed a limited one. Most of them I left many of them, right? So I have listed IoT services, migration services, microservices, storage services, compute services. There is a AI related services, there is a blockchain related services, so there is a mobile related services. So there are many services are available. So we have to categorize that, bucketed into the each of these services, what are the functionality we can see. So if you see from the leftmost, right, I have listed out the IoT services. So in this particular IoT services, we will cover all IoT related activity. So I understand that everybody understand what is IoT. Otherwise, it's an Internet of Things where you are going to, your hardware will be connected to a Azure, and through which you can perform the operations. Example, if you want to measure the water temperature, right? So you want to measure the weather temperature. So we can use the devices, and from the devices we can collect the data and you can perform the analytics operation on top of it. So IoT services, we have IoT Edge, we got IoT Hub, IoT Central. There are again various services are available, but I listed out few of them here. Migration services is something when you want to move your application from the on-prem to the cloud or from one cloud to the another cloud. So how you're going to use these migration services. So how you're going to migrate your DB, how you are going to migrate your VM. If there is a large amount of data is available, how you are going to migrate that data. So those kind of a services, what we look in the migration services. Microservices, I think microservices where a Docker concept comes up. So where all you can put your Dockers, right? So you can put your Docker on AKS, ACI, service fabric, right? Service mesh is another important uh, network related activity, how we can perform on the AKS or on the ACI. Even you can put a microservices on web apps or there's Azure functions. So microservices can be hosted on several Azure services. So that's what we are going to cover under the microservices. Storage services are pretty common. Storage services, whether you go for a IaaS kind of a operation or you go for a PaaS kind of a operation, your storage services are going to be very common, right? So you want to store the images or you want to store the log files, you have to store the images. So you need definitely some of the storage services. So there we have a blob storage or the file storage, and we have a queuing mechanism, which is also called one sort of a storage. So we got a service bus queue, we got a normal queue, then there is another service called topics. If the volume of data is too huge, right, then we go for a data lake kind of a concept, and we can perform on the data lake, that is called a data lake analytics, where you can perform the analytics operations on the data lakes. Even you can perform the analytics operations on the blob storage, that is also possible. So those kind of a services what we are going to see on the storage service. In compute service, where we are going to see our web apps, where how we can host your web application or API based application onto the Azure. And if there is a recurring job you have to perform, recurring operations you have to perform scale out, scale up operation, how your computing instances can going to help you to achieve your end target. So those kind of services what we are going to study in the compute services. I left few more services like you have a big data services. So how you're going to store all this big data. There is something called ADF, Azure Data Factory, which will help you to orchestrate your data, moving to the no, right from collecting the data to the massaging the data, then transforming the data, and then displaying the data. So those kind of services are there. Then we got a blockchain kind of a services where you can perform the blockchain related activity to keep your data unique onto the platform. So those are another set of services. So, but for our learning purpose, we will start with the compute service. So when we talk about the compute service, we are not limiting only to the compute service. We'll probably will look at the some more services along with the compute. So whenever you build a software on Azure, it's a combination of PaaS service and it's a combination of IaaS service. So together it becomes a one whole solution. It's a very rare or a very less possibility that you get only the PaaS services and you're not going to consume any IaaS services. That's not going to happen. So it's going to be a combination of both, because ultimately your application and your hardware has to be protected. To protect that, you have to look for the IaaS services such as application gateway or the front door services or the DDoS, distributed denial of service kind of a services. We have to look upon that, right? So in coming sessions, we will start looking onto the compute service. We'll try to cover as depth as possible in that. Thanks, guys. Bye.